Hello everyone and welcome. Thank you for joining me in the video today. This is the Kessler & Sons Midnight Model low C bass clarinet, one of the newest low C bass clarinets on the market. Now I posted some pictures of this instrument on my Instagram and a lot of you guys were curious about how this instrument plays. So I thought I would make a review of this instrument and give you my opinions of it, not just as a player, but also as a repair tech. I'm going to be talking about the mechanics of this bass clarinet, how it feels, how durable I think it will be, and overall how well it's built. So without further ado, let's get started. Now one of the most unique features of this bass clarinet is the beautiful black nickel keywork. One to understand, this keywork is black nickel plated and then covered with lacquer to protect the finish. Now I was a little bit worried after hearing keys were covered in lacquer because I thought it might affect how they feel, but I have to say the keys have a really nice grippy feel to them, almost like silver plating. It's quite comfortable in the hands, and from what I understand the lacquer is quite durable, so I see no concerns with the finish wearing off. A lot of people have asked what is the difference between the first and second generation of Kessler bass clarinets. On the first generation, the keys feel very reminiscent of a Sommer privilege. The mechanism in general feels very big and robust in the hands, and it has these flat touch pieces. On the second generation, it feels almost very reminiscent of some of the earlier Sommer bass clarinets. The key touch pieces are concave, and they feel very comfortable underneath the fingers. And the mechanism itself, for me at least, feels a lot more comfortable. I'm very happy with the ergonomics of the second generation Kessler bass clarinet. Now another huge problem I tend to see on cheaper low C bass clarinets is that the thumb keys for the lowest notes. On a lot of cheap instruments, not only are the keys somewhat uncomfortable and hard to press, but often the travel is quite great. You can see for the low D key on this instrument, I have to push the key almost half an inch just to close the pad cups. And even when it is closed, there's a lot of sponginess in the key, so it really feels uncomfortable under the thumb. And also, because it goes so far, it's very hard to slide between different thumb keys. On the Kessler second generation, I'm happy to say that the thumb keys are quite well designed. Not only are they very easy to press, but once they are closed, there's not really a lot of sponginess in the action, so it feels very comfortable, and not only that, it's very easy to slide between different thumb keys. So overall, the basset mechanism, as I call it, on the Kessler second generation is one of the best I've ever seen as far as Chinese bass clarinets go. I'm really happy to see that there was improvements over earlier Chinese instruments. In addition to the keys for the right thumb, I've also found that a lot of cheaper instruments, the left-hand low D lever either works poorly or in some cases doesn't even work at all. However, I'm happy to report that on the Kessler, the lever is quite easy to press, even with the pinky. So in order to see how good the mechanism is on this instrument, what I want to do is I want to take one of the rods out and I want to inspect it and see how well it's made. Now, a lot of manufacturers tend to skim on the quality of the screws and rods because they're not something you really see unless you take the instrument apart. So let me just take out this rod right here. Now the first thing I'm going to look for is how easy it is to unscrew. If it's nice and easy to unscrew, that tells me that the threads are cut very well. In some cheap low C bass clarinets, I've even seen where the threads aren't even cut at all. So already this feels a lot better than some instruments. So now I'm just going to carefully take the rod out. It seems to come out fairly smoothly. There we go. So overall, the finish on the rod looks pretty good. If I put it back in the key, I don't really feel any slop. Everything looks nice and good there. Now let's look at the seats for the pads. So I don't see any chips or indentations or signs that they use a really poor quality drill bit. So overall, everything here looks pretty well built. So now that we've seen how well this bass clarinet is built, I want to check how well it's set up. The instrument has these really cool looking black leather pads throughout, and while they look good, I want to see how well they seal. In order to do that, what I'm going to be doing is called a suction test. For this test, what I'm going to be doing is closing off all the keys on this joint with one hand and closing off the end with the palm of my other hand. I'm then going to put the joint to my mouth and suck out the air and lift my first two fingers so that the only things holding these keys closed is the vacuum inside the joint. I'm then going to be seeing how long these keys stay closed before they pop open. On a good bass clarinet that's set up well, it should stay closed for about 3 seconds. So let's give it a go. Okay, not bad. So that was about 4 seconds. So that tells me that this bass clarinet is set up fairly well. Another big problem with cheaper instruments is intonation. While no instrument is perfectly in tune, a good instrument should have a fairly even scale throughout the entire range of this instrument. On this clarinet, I didn't really notice any serious intonation problems that you wouldn't find on other bass clarinets. One note that was particularly out of tune was the low C sharp in this instrument, which in this case is about 30 cents flat. Now, while that may seem bad, it's worth noting that this is actually a really common problem on low C bass clarinets. You see, a lot of times manufacturers don't want to make two separate bells, one for their low E flat model and one for the low C model. So what often happens is that low C instruments will often get the same bell as the low E flat model. What this means is that the tone hole is acoustically positioned too low. Ideally, it should be somewhere up here, but unfortunately the tenon is right there, so that wouldn't be possible. So this is a fairly common compromise on a lot of low C bass clarinets. And while it can be a little difficult to try and lift that note up in performances, the low C sharp is a very uncommon note, and given that it's very common to see bass clarinets with this problem, I'm not going to fault the instrument for it. The rest of the instrument plays a fairly even scale. There's a little bit of sharpness at the bottom of the clarion register, specifically clarion B and C, but again, that's very common with bass clarinets, mainly because of the register vent and how it's a compromise. And again, no instrument is perfect, and because of all the compromises that need to be made in the design of a clarinet, it's pretty much unavoidable in a lot of instruments, and I'm not going to fault the instrument for it. Overall, the scale is very even, and I think it's a very well-designed clarinet from an acoustic standpoint. So now that we've talked about the intonation of the instrument, let's talk about the tone. A good, well-set-up bass clarinet should have a very even tone throughout its entire range, with no stuffy or fuzzy notes. So let's take a listen to this bass clarinet. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be playing a chromatic scale from low C up to high C. So overall it was pretty good. I did notice one thing, and that was the low clarion B natural. I noticed that it was a little bit stuffy. Now this is a fairly common problem on bass clarinets in general, and when you have to play a B natural that's held out, what I would recommend is using the chromatic fingering. So that's your first finger, and then use the sliver key down here. So you can hear that that note responds much better. So while there is that one problem, overall I think the tone and response of the instrument is quite good. Overall, for under $3,000, I would say that this instrument is quite a good deal. Not only does it play well, but it feels very well built, and it's a lot better than other Chinese bass clarinets I've seen in the past. If you're looking for an instrument with a really distinctive look to make you stand out, I think this is a great option. Now, I think this bass clarinet is potentially even usable by professionals. The intonation is very good, and the tone and response is quite good as well. While it's not quite as good as some of the higher end bass clarinets, at less than 1/3 the price, I think it's a very good, affordable instrument for those of us that can't afford a top-of-the-line bass clarinet. So thank you everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you have any questions about this instrument in the comments. Alright everyone, I hope you have a wonderful day.